Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Wits University. Please note that flash photography is not permitted during the ceremony. Kindly deactivate all cell phones and pages, as this interferes with the sensitive electronic equipment in the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, will the congregation please rise?
I don't think that women take off their hats. Another round of applause for the first choir. Greetings. My name is Zebulon Vilagazi. I'm the Vice Chancellor and Principal of this university, and I will be presiding over this august occasions ceremony today, ably assisted by the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Professor Lynn Morris, sitting on my left. And I'd like also to introduce in time the appropriate deans that the Deputy Vice Chancellor will introduce to you, who will read the citations and reports for all the PhDs and senior doctorates that will be awarded in this graduation ceremony. I'd also like to welcome the members of the academic faculty, the academics sitting behind me and on my side, who will be here to support you and, of course, congratulate all of you on my left that will be receiving what I would call the highest academic accolade, that of a doctorate degree. I'd also like to introduce members of the Convocation, the acting president of the Convocation, the president, members of the SRC, the president, the dean of student affairs, and the registrar's office, who have ensured that these proceedings for today go through seamlessly. This, however, is your moment, and I'd like first, just before I start, to welcome you back to the Great Hall, this majestic Great Hall in its 100th year. The facade of the Great Hall, with these imposing Corinthian pillars, had to go through a process of facelift, as it were. It took us some time because of COVID restrictions of 2 years ago. Construction moved very slowly. And of course, all construction works rely heavily on weather and heritage. These structures are more than 90 years old, so obviously we needed to ensure that we maintain the integrity of the original design and plan as it was established with the great ambitions of 1922. And we ensured, however, that at this morning's session, just before we started with this ceremony today, that at 8 o'clock, I was asked to come and cut the ribbon for this. So we timed it especially for you to be honored today, to ensure that we have a grand occasion of the relaunch of the Centenary Great Hall. Congratulations. As you're all aware, today's session is largely about PhDs. A doctoral degree is a culmination of 3, 4, sometimes 5, or even beyond years of dedicated hard work, solitude. Most of us sitting here on the stage have been through that eye of the needle. It's a process where an individual chooses a topic with their supervisor, advisor, and that topic symbolizes a unique contribution in a particular area of scholarship that you endeavor in. So the graduates today have contributed a brick in the huge wall of knowledge. For that, you really deserve another round of applause. It's important, as we turn around the corner, following the COVID challenge we faced, and other challenges society and the world is buffeted with, that we solve our problems, our most complex problems, through reason. I always believe that the most complex problems cannot be solved just by venting emotions, but can be solved by using the power of the cortex over the limbic. You are trained to think and solve abstract problems. And these problems require clarity of thought, rigor, and courage in taking and tackling some of the toughest problems that we face as humanity. It's climate change that you're contending with. I was in the UK last week for some minor occasion I had to attend, and temperatures hit around 40 degrees, right? You've heard of the fires and droughts that actually are currently faced by the Mediterranean parts of Southern Europe. So what it means that the world is facing is existential challenge for survival. On the other hand, however, as a physicist, I was very, very excited to see pictures, early pictures that were sent by the largest terrestrial telescope called the James Webb Telescope. The James Webb Telescope is positioned at about 1 million miles from here. It was confined, it was constricted like origami, $10 billion US. That was shipped out through a rocket, and of course, using the moon's and the other planets' gravitational push, was located at a particular fixed point about the same distance as the sun on the other side, called L2, Lagrange 2. That's a very stable point where this rocket will sit. It worked 100%, no failure at all, because it had multiple points of failure. There were about 1 million multiple points of failure, but thanks to the excellence of global collaboration in science with NASA, the European Space Agencies, and other agencies across the world, they went out there and showed images of the early universe of about 13.7 billion years ago, and a near proximity galaxy, which was 5 billion years ago, long before the Earth was formed. I think this speaks not only of the power of science, but the power of human ability. When we work together, we can achieve a near impossible. I do believe that with this inspiration, many of you sitting on my left or graduating today will one day be leading this continent and the world in tackling some of these problems. Yes, there will be many to come, but through thought, through resilience, and through the experience and education you've received from this great university, you will deliver our own moonshots. From which university are you getting this degree? This is arguably, and I bore witness to it at an occasion I attended last week in London, that this university has produced some of the world's leading scientists, Nobel laureates, members who sit in some of the leading academies in the world, scholars who have contributed significantly in all areas of engineering, science, humanities, and others. Working from this African continent, others have gone on and made a huge impact abroad and indeed became great representatives and ambassadors for this university. You are part of 3 honorary degrees, 2 senior doctorates, 152 PhDs, and 615 master's degrees, which will be conferred during this week's events of ceremonies. The university boasts close to 500 rated scientists, almost 30 of whom are A-rated, including some of the Deputy Vice-Chancellor here and some of the deans sitting there. So the university at the top is led by scholars of high distinction. We are one of the 2 top-ranking universities in the country and on the continent, ranked among the top 1% in the world. We occasionally jostle for number 1 position with the other place on the south, but it's not about positions or rankings. It is about our contribution to society. Rankings are a function of how people perceive you. But our mission-critical assignment as a university is to produce leaders like Nelson Mandela, to produce ethical business leaders, and to produce new knowledge through awards of PhDs. So as I conclude, I'd like to say once again to you, graduates today, welcome to this elite club. Elite, but not elitist. This elite club of people who have achieved the highest possible academic achievement and attained your red jackets. And good luck, and may the force be with you. Thank you very much. By virtue of the power vested in me as Vice-Chancellor, I hereby constitute this congregation of the University of the Witwatersrand for the conferment of degrees. Today, candidates will be presented for degrees in the faculties of Commerce, Law and Management, Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment, Faculty of Health Sciences, Faculty of Humanities, and the Faculty of Science. I confer degrees on those whose names appear in the graduation program.
Thank you, VC. So I would now like to call on the deans to confer these degrees. So I call upon the Acting Dean of the Faculty of Commerce, Law and Management, Professor Jason Cohen, the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment, Prof. Thokozani Majosi, the Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences, Prof. Shabir Mahdi, the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, Prof. Garth Stevens, and the Acting Dean of Science, Prof. Sarah Wits, who is standing in for Professor Nithya Chetty. And they are now to present the candidates with their degrees. Thank you.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, as Acting Dean of the Faculty of Commerce, Law and Management, I have the honor to present candidates for degrees. For a thesis titled Policy Uncertainty, Economic Distance, and Macroeconomic Variables in Developing Economies, and supervised by Dr. Twenoboa, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Abigail Adjei for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Sustainable Supply Chain Management and Firm Performance in Ghana, examining the mediating and moderating factors, and supervised by Dr. Saruchera. Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Disraeli Asante Darko for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Essays on the Temporary Employment Services Sector in South Africa, an analysis using administrative data, and supervised by Professor Kasale, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Alia Kasim for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Intrinsic and Extrinsic Motivators of Online Engagement Amongst LGBT Online Cosmetic Brand Communities and the Effect It Has on Brand Equity, supervised by Dr. Fenta de Villiers and Dr. Chuchu, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Cassius Kutsia for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Complexities of the Professionalization Process and Ethics of Community Development in South Africa, supervised by Professor Pillay, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Kefilwe Ditlake for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled A Behavioral Strategy Perspective of Selected Psychological Triggers on Strategic Decision-Making, supervised by Professor Carmichael and Dr. van der Hoeven, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Aziz Kader for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Unpaid Reproductive Labor and Decent Work in the South African Labor Market, and supervised by Professor Pillay, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Odile Mackett for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled The Impact of Foreign Ownership in Emerging Markets Banking System, a Case of BRICS, supervised by Professor Mokwalele Mokoteli, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Sibusiso Makgakgola for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled An Analysis of South Africa's Framework for the Domestic Implementation of International Human Rights Standards Against Torture, supervised by Professor Swart, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Tsepang Makwati for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Impact Analysis of Institutional Quality on Foreign Direct Investment Inflows into the SADC region, supervised by Professor Pillay, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Koliswa Malindini for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. for a thesis titled Overpromising and Under-Delivering Zimbabwe's Extractive Industry Indigenization and Uneven Development, and supervised by Professor McCandles. Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Kennedy Manduna for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled The Glass Cliff, Exploring the Dynamics Around the Appointment of Women to Precarious Leadership Positions in Corporate South Africa, and supervised by Professor Ali Gidede, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Winsome Mashele for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Leadership Development Impact Evaluation Approaches, and supervised by Dr. Machabapala, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Vuyile Mbata for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled The Impact of Green Practices on Supply Chain Performance in the Textile and Clothing Industry in South Africa, supervised by Professor Mafini and Dr. Fenter de Villiers, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Tebogo Mofokeng for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Management Style and Employee Engagement in Blue-Collar Workers, supervised by Dr. Meyer, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Sheila Mudley for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Pathways to Power, Narratives of Women in Political Leadership in Botswana, supervised by Dr. Abrams, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Kenelwe Muketsane for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Combining Complexity Leadership with Operational Systems and Structures for Adaptability in South African Private Hospitals, supervised by Professor Kobo, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Karen Nell for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Predictors of Rental Preference Amongst Generation Y, a Case of Santon, South Africa, supervised by Dr. Mgiba and Dr. Ligaraba, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Mtobisi Ntlabati for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Relationship Quality and Exhibition Brand Preference as Antecedents of Future Exhibition Intention and Performance in Zimbabwe, and supervised by Dr. Fenta de Villiers, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Zungezile Ntini for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Gender-Based Inequalities in Access to Water and Sanitation in South Africa, case study of 2 informal settlements, supervised by Dr. Wafer, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Bokiwe Ntwana for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Towards Framework for Asset Pricing in Developing Equity Markets, supervised by Professor Kodongo, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Wycliffe Omar for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Differentiated Workforce on Strategy Implementation Within the Insurance Industry, a Strategy as Practice Approach, supervised by Professor Samuel, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Vincent Motulwe for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, as Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment, I have the honor to present candidates for degrees. For a thesis titled The Intersection Between Global Urban Agendas and Practice at Local Levels in Housing and Human Settlements, a case of Lagos, and supervised by Professor Ali Karam, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Taiwo Adekanmi Afinowi for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled The Relationship Between Land Administration Systems and Spatial Change in the Peri-Urban Areas in Ghana, the case of Kumasi and Sunyani, and supervised by Professor Mari Hosemeya, Professor Philip Misewils, and Dr. Daniel Inkum, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present George Kwado Anane for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Development of Mixed Matrix Membrane for Desulfurization of Sulfur-Rich Petroleum Stream, and supervised by Professor Diakanu Wankazi and Dr. Munokoma Ubanik Kadimeng, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present George Swati Biola. For a thesis titled Volatility Interconnectedness Among Real Estate and Other Assets in the BRICS Countries, and supervised by Dr. Tumelano Sibehela, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Katleho Violet Gola for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Application of Artificial Neural Network for Prediction of Sulfidogenic Fluidized Bed Reactor Performance and Optimization for the Co-Treatment of Acid Mine Drainage with Liquid Pharmaceutical Waste, and supervised by Professor Lubilanji Mulobo and Professor Babatunde Bakare, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Tobega Pearl Makatini for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled The Effects of Wet Supercritical Carbon Dioxide Treatment on the Storage Potential of Zululand in South Africa, the sandstones thereof, and supervised by Professor Nicola Wegner and Dr. Nandi Malumbazo, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Patience Mabengere for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled The Role and Influence of Street Trader Leaders in Urban Governance, and supervised by Professor Claire Benedict Bafou and Dr. Richard Ballard, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Mamkete Devon Modiba for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Who Governs Johannesburg Water? An actor network reading of water services governance in the city of Johannesburg. Let me repeat that, I understand the excitement. For a thesis titled Who Governs Johannesburg Water? An actor network reading of water services governance in the city of Johannesburg, looking in the period of 2000 to 2018, and supervised by Professor Claire Bennett Bafou and Dr. Richard Ballard. Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Darlington Mushongera for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled A Dual Interchange Algorithm for Three-Dimensional Stope Boundary Optimization for Underground Mines, and supervised by Professor Cuthbert Musingwini, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Adeodatus Sihesenkosi Ntlego for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Addressing Measurement Uncertainty in Laboratory Medicine and supervised by Professor David Rubin and Professor Benji Rosman, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Adam Pantanowicz for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled A Systems Architecture for Internet of Things, Connected Edge Runtime Configuration, and supervised by Associate Professor Kenneth Nixon, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Ibrahim Yassi Said for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Recycling of Tungsten Cobalt-Based Scrap Metal, Selective Dissolution of the Cobalt Binder Phase and Recovery of Variable Constituents using Complexing Agent Adiated Acid Leach Process, and supervised by Professor Sehliselo Ndlovu and Professor Natasha Sachs, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Alan Shemi for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Permutation-Coded Multiple Access and Multiple Input, Multiple Output Techniques for Hybrid Power Line and Visible Light Communication, and supervised by Professor Ling Cheng, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Mulundomena Shimaponda Nawa for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Developing an Advanced Reactor Model for Complex Non-Ideal Reactors, and supervised by Professor Craig Sheridan, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Ruth Jane Stephenson for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
It's a musical item.
Up here. Thank you, and congratulations to all of the graduates so far. So we now have a musical interlude, and I have the great honor of introducing three exceptionally talented young Witsies, young musicians. The first is Hlumelo Ledwaba. Curious and ambitious, Hlumelo is a Johannesburg-based master's graduate from Wits. Ledwaba's passion for the human voice inspired her journey into the world of jazz, musical theatre, and classical singing since 2012. Having completed her bachelor's degree in vocal jazz performance, Ledwaba's classical and musical theatre explorations proved to be fresh and exhilarating. From Ella to Mozart, then Bernstein and Sondheim, Hlumelo seeks to encounter the various dimensions the voice has to offer. Whether written, spoken, or sung, the human voice transmits, transforms, and transcends like no other form of communication. These are the very attributes Hlumelo aims to embody in her quest for vocal mastery. She currently is under the tutelage of the renowned classical vocalist Eugene Choplin and South Africa's darling Michael de Pina. Through their guidance, Hlumelo continues to grow towards new heights. Our second talented musician is Nokuthula Magubane, who's also a Wits B Music Honours graduate who majored in classical vocal performance as a soprano and has a passion for classical music and the arts. Throughout her degree, Nokuthula worked with a vocal tutor, Eugene Chopin, under whom she presented her final year recital in November 2019. Nokuthula has been and still is part of William Kentridge's production, The Head and the Load. With the production, she has performed in New York's Armory, London, Germany's Ruhr's Festival, and the Holland Festival in Amsterdam. Nokuthula is also part of the Musa Relief Project, headed by Philip Miller, which aimed to keep artists going through the tough COVID lockdown. The project has also released an album called Kaluza, the B-side, which is a collection of works by the South African choral composer Rubian T. Kaluza. Nokuthula is now ready to step back onto the stage and fulfill her lifelong dream of being a performer, musician, and artist in her own right. And finally, Andrew Duncan. Andrew holds a B.Mus in music with a distinction from Rhodes University and a B Music in Honours and Postgraduate Diploma in Performance with distinction from UCT and an ATCL and an LTCL, also with distinction. The recipient of many bursaries and academic prizes, he has also participated in several national competitions, claiming a second prize in both the 2009 and 2014 Grahamstown National Music Competition. Andrew was the winner of the 2014 James de Villiers competition and 2015 Robert Andrews competition. More recently, his piano duet performances at the 2021 Makanda National Arts Festival with Jacques Duplessis earned them a Standard Bank Ovation Award. Much in demand as an accompanist, he has acted as a staff accompanist for Rhodes University, the Gauteng Opera, and later the Johannesburg Opera. He is currently completing a master's in music in creative work at Wits University, studying piano with Malcolm Ney and Pauline Nossel. And we look forward to these wonderful performances. Thank you.
Always something technical to happen. cielsara, deviene a me riposati, so che questo t'ama, che per te spira e brama, che per te sopravvivrà. Luci di quest'anima, delizia, amore e vita, unita nostra sorte, terra in ciel sarà, unita nostra sorte. Di questa delizia, amore e vita, la nostra sottenita in terra in ciel sarà, deviene a me riposati, so che questo t'ama, che per te spira e brama, che per te sopravvivrà. Luce di quest'anima, delizia, amore e vita, unita nostra sorte, terra in ciel sarà, unita nostra sorte. Vieni al mio cuore che per te spira, che per te solo si solvivrà. Sì, si solvivrà per te. Vieni, 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 vieni. Sì, si solvivrà per te. Si vivrà. c'est moi, comme opère Vesuvius, vite, se tremble de foi, pour que le Dieu connaissant les protège, jusque les temps où se battent jouer, le Seigneur des neiges, en laquelle l'eau tous bleus, et près de signes et de la neige, alors tous bleus, sous le tombé, où le blanc jasmin, en la rose ensemble. Charmant, suivant le courant, fuyant dans les filissates, d'une main nonchalante, flaquant les bords, où le souci d'eau. L'oiseau chante sous le dôme, où le blanc jasmin vient des eaux.
Of the most talented of what we can show to you. Today you brought expression to the artistic genius of this university. Another round of applause. Our accompanying pianist here, I'm going to add a bit of levity. I couldn't help but just, I kept on looking at you. You have an uncanny resemblance to Ryan Gosling, the actor. But congratulations once again. And I'll call upon the Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences to present the senior doctorates of the University of the Witwatersrand. Thank you.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, as Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences, I have the honor to present candidates for the degree, Doctor of Science in Medicine, the highest degree conferred by the university. In 1990, projected laboratory costs for HIV/AIDS program was set to overwhelm South Africa's healthcare budget. Prof. Glencross' development of the novel pan-leukogated CD4 tests addressed this problem, substantially reducing costs while additionally simplifying testing and significantly improving test quality. More than 40 million tests have supported HIV patient care since 2004, with an estimated saving that exceeds 8 billion rand. The work presented in the study outlined the development, scale-up, national implementation, and ongoing review of this important diagnostic HIV innovation in South Africa. For a thesis titled Pan-Leukogated CD4 HIV Immune Monitoring, A Difference by Disruption, amended by Emeritus Professor C. Zabo, Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Deborah Glencross for the degree of Doctor of Science in Medicine. Inherited or familial hypercholesterolemia remains a difficult condition to treat. As a result of markedly elevated cholesterol levels from birth, untreated patients with familial hypercholesterolemia suffer from early heart attack and often premature death. Prof. Derek Rowell has played a pivotal role in advancing the treatment for familial hypercholesterolemia, both locally and internationally. And his thesis describes his advances in therapy over the past 3 decades. For a thesis titled Familial Hypercholesterolemia, 3 Decades of Advances in Therapy, and supervised by Prof. Charles Feldman, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Frederick Rowell for the degree of Doctor of Science in Medicine. Mr. Vice Chancellor in Principal, as Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences, I have the honor to present candidates for a degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis title, A Model of Family-Centered Care at the Pediatric and Neonatal Intensive Care Setting in Ghana, and supervised by Professor S. Schmolgruber, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Al-Hassan Abukari for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Development of an Undergraduate Antibiotic Stewardship Training Program for Medical Students, and supervised by Professor R. Van Zyl, Associate Professor P. McEnery, Dr. J. Millot, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Muhammad Bashar for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Chronic Non-Communicable Diseases, Multimorbidities in South African Adults, Evidence from the WHO SAGE Study, and supervised by Professor L.K. Mikkelsfield, Dr. L.J. Ware, and Dr. I. Maposa, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Glory Chidumwa for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled The Physical Sequelae of Perinatally Acquired HIV in Adolescents, and supervised by Professor J. Potterton and Associate Professor V. Insia, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Nicolette Comley-White for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled, A Systematic Assessment of the Copy Number Variation Landscape in ADME Genes in Sub-Saharan African Populations, and supervised by Professor S. Hazelhurst and Dr. V. Sahabdin, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Laura N. Cotino for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Effects of Gigella africana, Ximenia cafra, and Mimosap's zahiri seed oils on hormone-independent and hormone-dependent breast cancer cells, and supervised by Associate Professor E. Givandi and Professor W. Daniels. Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Monica Gomez for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Development and Pilot Testing of a Clinical Nursing Guideline for Transition of Psychosocial Care from the Intensive Care Unit to the Ward in Malawi, and supervised by Professor S. Schmolgruber, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Winers Gondwe for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Cardiovascular Disease and its Associated Risk Factors in South African Chronic Kidney Disease Patients, and supervised by Professor G. Norton and Professor P. Dessen, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Hon Chun Shu for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled The Dynamics of Compliance with the National Core Standards for Health Establishments in South Africa, a case study of 2 tertiary hospitals in Gauteng province, and supervised by Dr. S. Armstrong and Dr. P. Ditlopo, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Spiwe Mabena for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled The Development of a Screening Protocol to Determine the Risk for Injury Among Elite South African Rugby Players, and supervised by Professor B. Olivier and Dr. N. Benjamin Demmons, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Candace Macmillan for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis title, Making a Rural Workforce, Exploring the Habitus of Health Science Students from Rural South Africa, and supervised by Professor L. Mendelson and Professor S. Reed, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Nonsikelelo Mapukata for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis title, Botulinum Neurotoxin in the Management of Essential Infantile Esotropia, and supervised by Professor M. Tickley and Professor S. Williams. Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Ismail Mayet for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. for a thesis titled A Virtue Ethics Framework for Modern Anatomical Pathology, and supervised by Professor C.S. Wehem. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Hildy Menegio for a degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Towards an Ethically Justified Model for Access to Healthcare in Zimbabwe, and supervised by Dr. J. Gartner and Professor C. Wehem, Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Farayi Moyana for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Exploring the Social Consequences of Cash Transfers on Adolescent Recipients and Their Relationships, and supervised by Professor C. McPhail and Professor S. Delaney Moretlwe, Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Makosazane Indemande Koza for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Monitoring HIV/AIDS Dynamics, an application of real-time assessment methods for estimating prevalence at district levels in Uganda, and supervised by Professor J. Levine, Professor J. Valadez, and Dr. C. Jaffery, Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Joseph D.O. Omar for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Multivariate Analysis of Drug Safety in Clinical Trials with Application to Antimalarials in Pregnancy in Malawi, and supervised by Professor T. Chirwa, Professor M. K. Laufer, Professor M. Mukaka, Professor L. Kazembe, and Professor M. J. C. H. Cummins, Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Noel Patson for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Doctors' Consultation Skills and Patients' Sexual Health in Primary Healthcare Settings in Northwest Province, and supervised by Dr. M. G. Mlambo and Professor I.D. Cooper, Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Deirdre Pretorius for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Movement, the Musculoskeletal System and Lower Back Pain in Young Elite Male Golfers, and supervised by Professor B. Olivier and Associate Professor W. McKinnon, Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Samantha Lynn Kun for a degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Epidemiology and Pulmonary Sequelae in Children with Human Metapneumovirus Associated Lower Respiratory Tract Infection, and supervised by Professor S. Mahdi, Professor J. Duffman, and Dr. C. Verwey, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Lesego Ramocha for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled The Effects of a Street Cocktail Drug on the Opioid Signaling System in the Rat Brain and Benefits of Moringa oleifera Extracts, and supervised by Professor W. Daniels and Dr. D. Muller, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Michael Sikota for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Ethical Obligations that Arise from the Effects of Cultural and Religious Practices and Beliefs on the Well-being of Children with Autism Spectrum Disorders, and supervised by Professor K. Behrens, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Ayanda Simelane for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Characterization of Pharmacogene Allelic Variation in African Populations and Development of a Novel Diploid Type Calling Algorithm, and supervised by Professor S. Hazelers and Professor Z. Lombard, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present David Wesigomwe for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled The Effect of Prism Adaptation Therapy and the Current Practice in Treatment of Post-Stroke Unilateral Spatial Neglect, and supervised by Professor V. Insia and Professor R. Roos, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Chuka Umyankuuka for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Epidemiology and Pulmonary Sequelae in Infants with Severe Respiratory Syncytial Virus Lower Respiratory Tract Infection, and supervised by Professor Z. Dengo and Professor S. Mahdi, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Charles Verwey for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Analytical Frameworks for Studies Prone to Misclassification Bias to Identify Correlates of Disease Protection, Case Study Immunity to Malaria, and supervised by Professor E. Musenge, Professor S. Kinyan-Ju, and Professor F. Ossia, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Kennedy Wambui for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis title, Establishing a Baseline for a Developmental Disorder Diagnosis by Evaluating Current Processes and Mapping Common Benign Copy Number Variation in Africa, and supervised by Professor A. Kraus, Professor Z. Lombard, and Professor S. Hazelhurst Ossia, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Emma Wiener for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis title, Understanding Managers' Experiences of Public Financial Management Policies and Reform, a qualitative study from a South African Provincial Department of Health, and supervised by Professor J. Gouge, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present Jody Wishnia for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, as Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, I have the honor to present candidates for degrees. For a thesis titled, A Study of the Manufacture of Visibility for South African Black Women Artists Practicing in Post-Apartheid South Africa by Intersecting Commercial, Academic, and Social Media Engagement, and supervised by Associate Professor A. Kearney, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Lois Anguria. For a thesis titled Music, Agency and Social Transformation in Africa, a case of Fuji music in Lagos, Nigeria, and supervised by Dr. M. Joritsma, Associate Professor M. Suriana, and Dr. R. Orak. Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Oladele Oyarindi for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled, Enter the Frame, Reflections on Cinematic Practice, and supervised by Dr. N. Ntambo, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Lachelle Barry for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, The Implementation of Language Management Projects for Previously Marginalized South African Indigenous Languages in the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor and supervised by Dr. E. Zungu, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Ziningi Tsele for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, From Gender Disparity to Gender Parity in School Leadership, Narratives of Female School Heads from Harare Province, Zimbabwe, and supervised by Dr. G. Motilal, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Vongai Chakanyuka for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, The Problem of Thinking in Black and White, Race in the South African Clinical Dyad, and supervised by Professor G. Stevens, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Yvette Esprit for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, Mathematical Identities and Trajectories of Secondary School Learners, and supervised by Professor K. Brody, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Arifa Gadi for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, Dynamics of HIV Chronic Comorbidities Amongst Adults in South Africa, a population-based mixed method study, and supervised by Associate Professor N. Devet Billings, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Botlatso Gonongwana for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, Adapting an Online Screening Tool for Major Depressive Disorder in South Africa, and supervised by Professor S. Lahair, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Tasneem Hassam for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, Animated Sequences, Chronophotography in Contemporary Animation Practice, and supervised by Associate Professor C. Doherty, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Bronwyn Horn for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled Of Water and Water Spirits in Southern African Literature, and supervised by Professor C. Hofmeyer, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Confidence Joseph for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, The Same in, All But Name, and supervised by Professor J. Quirk, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Sarah Delius for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, SGB Parent Members and Other Parents' Attitudes Towards Inclusion and Exclusion in Primary Schools, and supervised by Professor S. Lehe and Associate Professor E. Walton, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Anwin Kern for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled, Ukwaningu olunzulungesu lokusetshenziswa kwesataya emkulweni kamaskandi nomthelela ekophilili sanene kwabantu, and supervised by Dr. E. Zungu, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Dumisani Kumalu for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, Grasping and Appropriating Epistemic Relevance in the Humanities and Social Sciences, a Critical Realist Argument, and supervised by Dr. T. Matabula, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Tebelo Letseka for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, Independent Capability for Work, a Critical Functioning in Capabilities Approach to Higher Education in South Africa, and supervised by Dr. T. Becker, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Cameron Martin for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, Affective Dimensions of Naked Body Protests, and supervised by Associate Professor H. Canham, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Mpho Matabula for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, How are the Relationships Between South African Universities and Development Understood, and supervised by Professor S. Alay, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Palesa Molabatsi for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled Developing Practices of Mathematics, Teachers Through a Professional Learning Community and supervised by Professor Kay Brody, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Nicholas Molefe for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled Transnationalization and Indigenization of Euro-American Hymns in South Africa through the Creative Agency of Arranging and supervised by Associate Professor B. Piper, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Khomotso Moshugi for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, The Blind Gaze, a critical examination of disability and queer sexuality in South Africa, and supervised by Associate Professor S. Chari and Associate Professor M. Yarbrough, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Sisanda Msekele for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled Pedagogical Integration of Information and Communication Technology in Higher Education, a case study of initial teacher education programs in Eswatini and supervised by Dr. R. Dlamini and Dr. A. Masenere. Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Fikile Nkambule for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled Exploring Power Struggles in Online Spaces, a study of selected political WhatsApp communities in Kenya, and supervised by Associate Professor D. Ligaga, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Gloria Uko for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled Cognitive Language Processing Through Positron Emission Tomography and supervised by Professor M. Vangu and Professor J. Ings, Mr. Vice Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Natasha Parkins Maliko for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, The Transition from High School to the Workplace for Young Adults Who Have a Disability, and supervised by Associate Professor C. Storbeck, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Bronwyn Peake for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, Violence and Social Cleavages in the 2015-2016 Fees Must Fall Movement, a case study of Wits University, South Africa, and supervised by Professor K. van Holt and Professor L. Landau, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Alois Sibanda for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For the thesis titled, Water Governance and the Colonial Legacy in Zimbabwe, and supervised by Dr. S. Lowe, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to present Gunyai Tarvinga for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, as Acting Dean of the Faculty of Science, I have the honor to present candidates for degrees. For a thesis titled, Targeting LRP-LR for the Prevention of Tumor Formation and Metastasis in Lung Cancer Models, supervised by Professor S. Weiss, Professor M. Kaur, and Dr. E. van der Merwe. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Monique Binyu for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled, Modulation of Adhesion-Dependent Signaling by CK2 and its Associated Regulators in HOSCC Cells, supervised by Professor R. Veal. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Sandile Buthelezi for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled, The Evaluation of the Toxicity of the Bacillus thuringiensis cry proteins against reference and field populations of fall armyworm Spodoptera frutiperda, J. E. Smith in South Africa, supervised by Professor G. Bower. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Shen Jia for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis title, Establishing the Role of Cholesterol Ester Transfer Protein in Breast Cancer, supervised by Professor M. Kaur. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Zhu Leng for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Redirection of Carbon Cycle by Households in a Savanna Socio-Ecological System in Rural South Africa, supervised by Professor W. Twine. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Alambo Panduleni for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. Sorry. For a thesis titled Middle Permian Diversity of Large Herbivores, Taxonomic Revision of the Titanosuchidia, Titanosuchtherapsia, Dinocephalia of the Karoo Basin, South Africa, supervised by Professor Bruce Rubrich and Professor F.M. N. Abdallah. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Sifalani Jera for this degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled The Quest for an Improved Solid Oxide Fuel Cell Electrolyte, Exploring Bismutate Materials, supervised by Professor D. Billing and Professor C. Billing. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Matthias Kiefer for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled The K-Ramsey Number for Cycles, supervised by Professor E. Young and Professor J. Hutton. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Ronald Martins for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Application of Biocatalyst in the Synthesis of Antituberculosis Compounds and Analogues, supervised by Professor D. Brady and Professor C. de Koonen. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Mudzuli Mupfupa for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Synthesis and Characterization of Functionalized Graphene Oxide Embedded Thin Film Composite Membranes for Desalination Applications, supervised by Professor N. Maloto, Drs. K. Sikwivuli, Dr. G. Ndlovo, and Dr. Z. Tetana. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Cabo Isaac Macheche for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Inverse Opals and Waveguides to Enhance Optical Absorption and Efficiency of Photovoltaic Devices, supervised by Professor A. Quant and Professor D. Wamgamwamgi. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Luvoko Mayemele for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled, The Use of Functionalized Polymers to Make Hollow Carbon Spheres to be Used as Supports in Catalysis, supervised by Professor N.J. Koval and Professor R. Forbes. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Phumza Mente for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Sense and Sensibility, an investigation into the chemical crypsis of the puff adder, Betis areatans, supervised by Professor G. Alexander. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Asher D. Miller for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Synthesis and Supporting of Carbon Dots onto Titania, Carbonized Chitosan, Silica Spheres, Hollow and Solid Carbon Spheres for the Removal of Metal Orange from Wastewater, supervised by Dr. M. Mobane Nikadimeng, Professor N.J. Koval, and Professor E. Noksumalu. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Orlette Makari for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Perspectives on Adaptation to Water Scarcity and Drought of Small-Scale Farmers in Masvingo, Zimbabwe, supervised by Professor M.D. Simatele. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Tandiwe Mphala for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Assessment of the Environmental and Socio-Economic Impacts of Unrehabilitated Tailing Storage Facilities, Study of Blyvoruitzucht gold mine liquidation using dispersal and remote sensing models, supervised by Professor E. Adam and Dr. R. Mula. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Mbalendle Mpanza for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled South African Cassava Mosaic Virus Movement and Nuclear Shuttle Proteins, Uncovering Their Structures, supervised by Professor M.E.C. Ray and Dr. I.A. Ashilanu. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Nikita Nanku for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Engineering Robust Photonic Quantum States for Quantum Communication and Information, supervised by Professor A. Forbes. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Isaac Nape for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Protein-Protein Interactions in a Gemini Virus Cassava System, supervised by Professor M.E.C. Ray and Dr. N. Gentle. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Busisiwe Nkube Kanayeka for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Understanding the Dynamics of Herding and Cattle Posts in Pre-Colonial Tswana of the Last 500 Years, supervised by Professor K. Sadir and Dr. T. Russell. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Nonofo Ndubachani for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Repurposing of Sludge Generated from the Treatment of Acid Mine Drainage, supervised by Professor H. Tutu, Professor E. Krukoska, and Professor L. Chimunga. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Kutsachelo Netshayongolwe for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled The Role of Institutional Frameworks in Promoting Green Bonds to Finance Carbon Capture and Storage in South Africa, supervised by Professor M.D. Simatile. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Nomle Ngwenya for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Colloidal Synthesis and Characterization of Molybdenum and Tungsten-Based Phosphide Electrocatalysis for Hydrogen Evolution Reaction, supervised by Professor N. Meloto. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Siyabonga Nkabende for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Novel Ethnology and the Taphonomic Significance of Insect-Related bioerosion in bone. Supervisors were Dr. J. Z. Jenner, Professor L.R. Berger, and Dr. P. Randolph Quinney. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Alexander Haig Parkinson for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled, The Lesser-Known Declines Among South Africa's Antelope, Assessing Long-Term Population Dynamics in the Ukalamba, Drakensberg, and overall status across the country. Supervised by Professor F. Parini. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Tamana Patel for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Facial Emotion Recognition Using Temporal Relational Network, an Application to E-Learning, supervised by Professor H. Vadapali and Professor I. Sanders. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Anil Adumbar Pise for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Antimicrobial Activity of Silver and Copper Nanoparticles Incorporated with Biodegradable Polymeric Scaffolds for Wound Healing Application. Supervisors, Professor N. Maloto, Professor M. Mlambo, Dr. P. Tetiana, and Dr. Z. Ngiele Tetiana. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Nindivuho Shambula for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled, Algebraic Structures in Integer Partitions, supervised by Professor A. Munagi. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Ntendi Takalani for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Lithium Iron Phosphate Cathode Materials, Investigating the Structural Changes Caused by Synthetic Modification and Doping, supervised by Professor C. Billing, Professor D. Billing, and Professor D. Naido. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Michelle Thibault for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled Petrogenesis and Detailed Geochemical and Isotopic Studies of the Ipembe Carbonatite and Cyanide Rocks, Northwestern Namibia, supervised by Professor L. Balhar and Professor P. Nix. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Mbili Chanikayamwe for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. For a thesis titled, A Qualitative Study of Wood Charcoal that is dated to the time of the Toba volcano super eruption from Sibudu and border caves, South Africa, supervised by Professor M. Bamford. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present Bongikile Swane for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
Thank you, and once again, congratulations to all of the graduates. I'd now like to call upon the Acting President of Convocation to say a few words to the graduates.
Good day, Vice-Chancellor. Good day, Chancellor, our honored guests who have accompanied our graduates, our esteemed senior executive team, our academic staff on the podium, and a special welcome to our graduates this morning. My name is Nomfundo Ngobo, and I join you in my capacity as the acting head of the Wits Convocation Executive. And before I proceed, I would like to really just extend acknowledgement to our musicians this morning. I almost wanted to say to myself, don't try that at home. But it was a stellar performance. Graduates, there are very few defining moments in life, and it's without a doubt that a PhD graduation is certainly one of them. And as I was driving here this morning, I was thinking to myself, what a better day to obtain a PhD than on Nelson Mandela Day, or at least have it conferred to me on Nelson Mandela Day. So you really are privileged. I'm going to go back to his popular quote of saying, emphasizing the importance of education, the most important thing that you can do for yourself to liberate your world and to free, or rather participate in your environment is really to advance in education. And that's what you've done this morning. And this morning you are now a PhD graduate from one of the top universities on the African continent, and you enter the world filled with many challenges, but a world filled with limitless possibilities. And at Wits, we hope that you meet all of these challenges and opportunities that await you with pride, with drive, with passion, innovation, with social conscience, with positive purpose, and with Ubuntu. While some of you are first-time graduates of the university, others have already obtained other degrees from Wits, and these PhD cohorts are forever united in association with the special individuals that you've been grouped or you are graduating with. Now, the Convocation of the University of Witwatersrand is a body that represents all the degreed graduates of Wits and forms a vital link between the university and the global community in which it operates. The membership is free and serves as an official channel, allowing you, the new members, to convey to the university management your views about the university. The membership This membership comes with several unique privileges, which includes the nomination of our chancellor and the participation at Senate through the designated nominees via the Convocation Exco. There are approximately 250,000 Wits graduates worldwide, and the distinction of our university is important to the prestige of the collective qualifications that have come out of the institution. Therefore, we call upon you to nurture and enhance the value of your degree by promoting Wits' image, preserving our values, and contributing towards the ongoing development, ensuring that we grow in stature as a globally competitive, proudly South African institution of higher learning. And we continue to disregard those down south. Now, whilst we certainly focus today's our attention on our newest graduates, it's also fitting to recognize those who've helped our graduates through their academic careers. Many of you have supported financially, and most likely you've supported with a great deal of encouragement, support at times that it mattered most. Now, graduates, with your scrolls in your hands, a great gift of education that you now have, please stand and lift them in the air. Please then take the opportunity to wave them to our families and supporting members as your show of appreciation. Please remain standing and show the same appreciation for the academic staff on stage. Thank you. You may be seated. I have no doubt that the past couple of years have been challenging, and we have the honor really of witnessing the blood, sweat, and tears culminate in a moment of the walk down the stage. And for us, it is an absolute privilege to share in your excitement and to really celebrate and congratulate you as you proceed and go on with life. As I said before, I would hope that you continue to contribute, whether through scholastic exercise at Wits, or in the corporate or in the spheres that you influence, through the work that you have done, so that you continue to make South Africa and the world a better place through education. As you arrive today, you would have received a graduate exit survey. Please ensure that you complete it and provide us with your updated email address so that we can remain in contact. The survey will take you no more than 5 minutes, and it will really assist us in improving our service offerings as an institution. We look forward to you checking out our social media pages, and as you proceed to post and share your pictures, you continue to tag us at #WitsiForLife. Please do remain in contact with us and follow us, and we wish you the very, very best in your future pursuit, and we hope that you continue to make this institution proud. And whatever you do, remember that Wits has given you the ultimate edge. With that, I say congratulations, halala.
Graduates, colleagues, and guests, this concludes proceedings for today. And now, by the virtue of the power of the office vested in me as a Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I hereby dissolve this congregation of the University of the Witwatersrand, Johannesburg. May you please rise.
Batwelo ngiyane obani labo yini naleyo ihelele zingwazi zakithi udwendwe lwezinwele zakithi nanti hele nanti hele losibakhulu nanti udwendwe udwendwe lwezinwele zakithi kodwa nathi